Chapter 2. The Suffering Sailors. For centuries, seafaring explorers have set sail in search of fame, fortune, and adventure. Many of them were merchants who went to look for shortcuts to far-flung places to trade. Others went to find new lands to live in and claim for their own countries. But it wasn't all plain sailing. If you thought life on the ocean wave was one long holiday, think again. Our intrepid sailors suffered horribly. For a start, the odious oceans are enormous. They cover about 2/3 of the planet, which is an awful lot of seawater to get lost in. Suffering sailors didn't have many maps and charts to guide them, and the ones they had were often woefully wrong. Instead, sailors had to rely on the sun and stars to find their way from A to B. What if it was cloudy that day? Well, then they got hopelessly lost. Now here's an earth-shattering fact for you. The plucky Phoenicians were superb sailors who explored the Mediterranean over 2,000 years ago. Mostly, they were in it for the money, trading in timber, tin, and a precious dye made from a kind of shellfish. Bet you were dying to know that, huh? But in about 500 BC, a Phoenician called Hanno set off on a sightseeing trip along the West African coast, where he also hoped to found some settlements. Among the weird and wonderful things he saw were crocodiles, hippos, and some very small, very hairy people. Puzzled, Hanno didn't know, but they were probably chimpanzees. There we see him being a little bit confused. Still raring to go? What do you mean you're feeling a bit seasick? Go on, push the boat out. You'll be in good company. The famous sailor you're about to meet didn't have time to moan about seasickness. He had enough trouble working out exactly where on earth he was. Confused Columbus. In 1492, Christopher Columbus set off on a voyage that changed the whole course of geography. He discovered a brand new part of the world by accident. Not that he ever admitted it. According to Columbus, he'd been somewhere else at the time. Here is his earth-shattering story. Christopher Columbus. Christopher was born in Genoa, Italy. His dad was a wool weaver, and the rest of his childhood was a bit woolly. But we do know that even as a lad, Chris was horribly curious. He wanted to see the big wide world. He spent all his spare time reading Marco Polo's book. We remember Marco Polo from last time. And daydreaming of following in his hero's footsteps. It drove his poor mom mad. When Columbus was 25 years old, he went to Portugal to work as a chart marker. A chart's a map that we use at sea. But his heart wasn't really in his work, and he longed to be off. Handily, in those days, Portugal was the perfect place for a budding explorer to be. Portuguese ships sailed far and wide, bringing back fabulous riches from the mysterious Indies, the lands that we now call Asia. Columbus loved to listen to the salty sailors' extraordinary tales. like the one about the island with beaches covered in gold sand, even though there wasn't a grain of truth to it. But here we have him, daydreaming about his hero. Another earth-shattering fact. It was thanks to Prince Henry the Navigator, who lived between 1394 and 1460, that Portugal became such a top spot for exploration. But despite his nautical nickname, Prince Henry never actually went to sea himself. Instead, he planned loads of daring expeditions to send other people on, including several to Africa. And he set up a school for navigators where all the top Portuguese sailors were trained. Apparently, Henry was just following what was written in his horoscope. What a star! And then one day, Columbus had a brilliant idea. An idea so earth-shattering, it would change the face of the earth. Rather than sail east to the Indies, why not sail west instead? Okay, so this might not sound very exciting to you, but at the time it was groundbreaking stuff. No one had ever sailed across the Atlantic Ocean before. No one knew if you even could. They called it the Green Sea of Darkness and steered well clear. But first, Columbus had to find someone to stump up the cash for his voyage. It was easier said than done. Most people laughed their socks off at his crackpot plan. Fed up with being fobbed off, Columbus fled to Spain, where the really rich king and queen agreed to dish up the dosh. At last, on August 3rd, 1492, Columbus set sail for Spain with 3 ships and 90 sailors and headed west into the unknown. At first, everything went swimmingly. The weather was fine, and gentle winds blew the ships along steadily. But as the days turned into weeks, there was still no sight of land. And things started to turn nasty. Very nasty. The sailors pleaded with Columbus to turn back before it was too late. If he didn't, they said, they'd throw him overboard. They didn't actually tell Columbus this bit. But Columbus wasn't about to turn back now. No way. To keep the suffering sailors' spirits up, Columbus kept an official log. That's the ship's diary, not a piece of wood. He gave it to the crew to read. Here's how it might have gone. Ship's official log, date September 22nd, 1492. To be read by absolutely everyone. Things are going brilliantly. Exactly as I'd planned. We're bang on course, I'm glad to say. It won't be long before we reach land. We've seen loads of seabirds and everyone knows they never fly far from shore. Besides, you know what I always say, if you sail the seas, you will always find land. I mean, would I lead you on a wild goose chase? Well, would I? Didn't think you really read that. Did he write it too? Unfortunately for Columbus, his top secret log was closer to the terrible truth. My top secret but true log, date September 26, 1492. Not to be read by anyone or else. Help. It's all going horribly wrong. I haven't a clue where we are. Not the foggiest. All that stuff I said about seabirds was a red herring. I mean, where on earth are the blooming Indies? By my calculations, we should have reached them days ago. Of course, I can't tell the men the truth. They'll go crazy. They might even want to kill me. And then I'll never get home. Guess this one's more like it, huh? Early in the morning of October 12th, the lookout sighted land. At last. After 33 grueling days at sea, the men couldn't believe their luck. Columbus called the island San Salvador and claimed it for Spain. That's what explorers did in those days. You found something, you claimed it. Horrible geographers reckon the island was in the Bahamas and not in the Caribbean Sea. That's off the coast of North and South America, and nowhere near Asia. So Columbus hadn't reached the Indies. He wasn't even close. Did it bother him? Not one bit. He firmly believed he'd reached Asia, and he didn't care what anyone said. He even got his confused crew to sign a document going along with his story. Else he'd have their tongues cut out. Nice. Over the next few months, Columbus set off on an island cruise. What a place for a holiday. Then on Christmas Day, disaster struck. His ship, the Santa Maria, ran aground near an island which Columbus called Hispaniola. He secretly hoped it was Japan. Talk about wishful thinking. Today it's split between the countries of Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Luckily, the local people were very friendly and helped the shipwrecked sailors ashore. Crafty Columbus built a stout fort from the ship's timbers and left 39 men behind to search for gold. And then he and the others sailed home to Spain in the other two seaworthy ships. In case he didn't make it back, Columbus wrote a letter to the king and queen of Spain telling them how brilliant he was. What a big head. And then he put it in a barrel and chucked it in the sea. Bet that was a barrel of laughs. In March 1493, Columbus arrived back in Spain to a hero's welcome. The king and queen were dead chuffed to see him, especially as he'd brought them piles of top presents. They gave him lots of grand-sounding titles like Admiral of the Ocean Sea. That's the Atlantic to you and me. There was no doubt about it. Columbus had the world at his feet. There he is, getting his hero's welcome. Now here is our teacher-student teaser. Columbus was a brilliant sailor. But even brilliant sailors can get it wrong. Are we clued up enough to spot Columbus's big mistake? A. Columbus thought the world was bigger than it actually was. B. Columbus thought the world was smaller than it actually was. Or C. Columbus didn't expect to find any way between Europe and Asia. Are we all at sea? Why not put us out of our misery and tell us the right answer? We'll be so godsmacked at our newfound nautical know-how. Maybe we'll be surprised. So, did Columbus make a mistake thinking the world was bigger than it actually was, smaller than it actually was, or did he actually not expect to find land between Europe and Asia? Where did Columbus go wrong? Write the answer as a comment to this activity.